You don't get to be a moderate and sign reparations into law. Done. Any facade Bob Ferguson had about, oh, I'm a moderate all of a sudden, I'm a fiscal conservative and all these things. No, when you sign a bill into law that gives $120,000 gifts to people based on their skin pigmentation, you don't get to be a moderate and you don't get to be a fiscal conservative. So Bob can say and do all these nice things that make him seem sane and reasonable, but this one throws everything out the window. So we have been, I think, reporting on this pretty exclusively for the past 2 years. The Covenant Home Ownership Program, as they titled it, because of course you don't want to call it reparations because the word reparations has a certain negative connotation to it and it's not a popular idea. So they called it the Covenant Home Ownership Program. And they passed it into law a couple years ago. It didn't get a lot of attention because it didn't have that word reparations in it. But then starting January 1st, 2024, if you were buying a home in the state of Washington, you, whether you knew it or not, were paying reparations. You were paying when you closed on a home and you had to pay the fees to document everything at the recorder's office. You were paying hundreds of additional dollars to go into the Covenant Home Ownership Program. So it created this pool of money for first-time home buyers who had the right skin color that they could dip into and get zero interest loans to cover closing costs and their down payment. And since then, a lot of people have used it. It's been very popular. And I gotta be honest, I would probably use it too if my skin color were correct. Because Lord knows it's incredibly difficult to save for a down payment on a home, especially in a state like Washington where home prices are so high. It takes years, it could take decades to save $100,000, $200,000, $300,000. But if your skin color is right, you don't have to save a thing. Because you can dip into the Covenant Home Ownership Program and you can get a zero interest loan that you only have to pay back once you sell the house you bought it with. So no interest, and you're going to pay it back years and years and years down the road only when you get the profits from selling the home that it helped you to buy. So the program as it has existed for 2 years was already bad enough because it's racist. It's racist and it's illegal, and the fact that nobody has sued over it is mind-boggling to me. And I say it's racist because there is no requirement in the law that you have to prove you or your family members were discriminated against. You only have to prove that you had family members who lived here during the time of housing discrimination. So if you're, let's just say like a black 25-year-old who's living in Washington state and your family has lived here for decades, even if your family has no proof that they were ever discriminated against in housing, you get to benefit from it. Other home buyers have to pay for your down payment. So the program was already bad enough. So what did Bob Ferguson sign? Because that program has already been law. Well, he signed changes to the Covenant Home Ownership Program in House Bill 1696. And these changes do a couple things, but one of the primary things that the changes do is it says those loans aren't loans anymore. Now, for a certain segment of first-time home buyers who benefit from this program and got the zero interest loan, which averaged $120,000 a loan, after 5 years of living in the house, you no longer have to pay it back. Here's Bob Ferguson, the moderate fiscal hawk, signing that bill into law.
Washington State's Covenant Homeownership Program provides down payment and closing cost assistance for lower-income, first-time homebuyers. Lawmakers created the program to address the disproportionate impacts of racial redlining in Washington State. House Bill 1696 modifies the program by adjusting the area median income threshold for program eligibility, introducing loan forgiveness, and modifying the Oversight Committee membership. This modification will create more opportunities to close the racial homeownership gap, which is a very important goal for all of us here in Washington State. We so appreciate everybody who made this legislation possible. We know it's been, like any legislation, challenging.
Yes.
This one has its share of challenges, as we know.
Yes.
But Representative Taylor has been a real champion of this legislation, and so we appreciate your leadership in particular. Thank you very much. And with that, I'm pleased to sign this legislation into law. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So you hear him there praise the leadership of the bill's prime sponsor, Representative Jamila Taylor. And I thought, gosh, what leadership is that? Is this the leadership he's praising?
Maybe they might want to call me a monkey today because I want to participate in our inclusive economy. This is getting ridiculous.
Yeah, that's the brand of leadership that Representative Jamila Taylor displayed on the floor when she was trying to guilt Republicans into voting for this bill. Republicans didn't support it. They made a bunch of really sound arguments against it. And honestly, they didn't even pull out the it's racist and illegal argument. They talked about how this wasn't a good program that was sustainable, and they believe that Democrats down the road are just going to have to fund it with general fund dollars. We'll get into that in a moment. So they stuck pretty firmly to fiscal arguments on the bill, not fairness arguments. And she completely out of nowhere said, well, I guess they might want to call me a monkey because I want to participate in our, state's economy. Is that the leadership, Bob? Is that leadership? What is Bob Ferguson talking about? Thank you, Representative Taylor, for your leadership. All she did was make this about race, racism, and call anyone who doesn't support reparations racist who might want to call her a monkey. And we're celebrating her for that? It's wild. So as I said, the bill is insane. So for people who meet the income threshold, a certain level of the poverty line, who utilize this program, after they live in the house for 5 years, that loan goes away. So it's a gift. So it's the government forcing other home buyers to pay the down payments for home buyers of color. Blatantly illegal, blatantly unconstitutional. I would also say that someone, in particular, a Jewish home buyer, should be the one to sue over this. Why? So as you said there, and as Bob Ferguson said, this is about righting, historical wrongs of housing discrimination. And yes, there was housing discrimination. There was redlining. There were groups of people in this state and in this country who, because of the color of their skin, were discriminated against. And I've said before that if you're making specific individuals whole again, who had specific instances where they were robbed of home ownership or land or whatever it is, then they have a case against the government. That's different to me. That's much different than this broad sense of reparations. Let's make people who didn't do anything wrong pay for other people's shit. So the reason I say a Jewish person who is buying a home in Washington state should sue over this is, you know what other group of people besides black people were discriminated against in housing in this state? Jewish people. You know who is explicitly left off and left out of the covenant home ownership program? Jewish people. So this is strictly about race, racism, about a misguided way of making up for and virtue signaling about wrongs of the past in a way that should be easy to defeat in court. But also it's going to have profound fiscal consequences. Because here's what's going to happen. And Republicans warned about this. This was one of their key arguments against it. Because again, they didn't want to get into the this is just racist argument, because then people like Jamila Taylor will say, oh, next thing I know, you're going to call me a monkey. So what Republicans said is the program as it has existed so far. So it's got a fund that, how does it replenish itself, right? So people who buy a home pay, $500 to $1,000 in recorders fees, added recorders fees that go into the Covenant Home Ownership Program fund. And then as people who benefit from that fund sell those homes eventually, they have to repay the loan, and then it continues to replenish the fund. The issue is, of course, the program was wildly popular in its first year, and the fund is basically depleted. So what happens when now you say the loans are forgivable after 5 years? You don't have that money coming back into that fund. So when the fund runs dry, because so many people want to utilize it, what are you going to do? Well, you're not just going to cancel the program. They love that. You love the program. Democrats love this. Virtue signaling at its finest. They're not just going to say, well, money's run out. I guess you're out of luck. No, they're going to find a different way to fund it. How are they going to fund it? They're going to take money out of the general fund. They're going to appropriate money in other ways. They're going to increase taxes to pay for reparations. And that's a no-brainer. If the fund is already low now, when you make the loans forgivable, the fund is going to be bone dry really, really quick. So there's a racism argument about this. And then there's a very obvious fiscal argument. And you've got Bob Ferguson, I'm a moderate, I'm a fiscal hawk, signing the thing. And we had asked his office 3 days ago because we saw this had gone to his desk like the 17th of April or maybe the 15th of April. And Nicole had emailed his office, is Bob Ferguson going to sign the reparations bill? And they still haven't returned. I mean, obviously we know now he signed it, but they never responded to our email. Probably because they know that it's terrible. And it's like, oh, well, nobody's going to watch him signing this on TVW. And maybe if we don't put statements out, no one's going to, he gets the credit for it with the far left, but then nobody's going to talk about it. Of course, we're going to talk about it. This is about as insane as it gets. So you don't get to, and I knew, and we knew, and I've said nice things about Bob Ferguson this session because he's said some good things about fiscal restraint and budgeting. But when you sign something like this, all of that goes out the window. And then if he signs rent control, that's just going to be the cherry on top of the far left-wing pie. So this is nut stuff. Somebody needs to sue over it. So if you are someone who's looking to buy a home in Washington State or actively trying to buy a home in Washington State, and you're interested in being the person, because you have to have somebody with standing who puts the lawsuit forth, I am sure that we could find an organization that would be willing to handle your case pro bono. And honestly, wouldn't bother me one bit if you get a $10 million payday from the state of Washington, even if it comes from the taxpayers, to prove a point on this bill. Insane stuff. And I also just continue to be offended by the notion that white people must not need any financial help. You have white people in this country who don't benefit from generational wealth. It's like this idea that, and it's kind of racist from Democrats, honestly, black people can't do anything on their own and they can't save money on their own, so we have to step in and help them. It's just insane stuff. I don't even know what to do with that. I saw that this morning. I was like, he signed it. I'll be honest, I told Nicole this, what he was going to do is not sign it, but not veto it. So if he doesn't sign it, but he doesn't veto it, eventually it just becomes law. And I thought that's probably what he'll do because it's such a blatantly illegal bill. He probably doesn't want his name on it. But no, he's proud, want to, prop up the left wing of his base. Just insane stuff.